America.
So sing it loud with me. College football forever. College football forever. Downtown LA, Starkville City. 1 week you're up next. Take a dip. Run the rock or let it rip. This game is America. All say, can you sing it with me?
We just stepped on her face with a hot-tail moving across her nose. Whoa, Nelly!
College football forever. College football forever. College football forever. College football forever.
College football is a year-round discussion with these two. Here's JC and Morgan. Mike Morgan of ESPN and JC Shurburtt of 24/7 Sports have you covered. Beginning right now.
Yes, indeed. Good morning. It could be good afternoon. It could be the middle of the night, whenever you choose to listen to us. But for those listening live, good morning as we start this bad boy kickoff, 9 a.m. kickoff, Jefferson Pilot style. If it was a JP game on the West Coast in the 1990s, it would be like right about now. They would be kicking it off. Stanford versus NC State in Palo Alto. Let's go to the Three Daves and enjoy the broadcast. He is JC Shurburtt. I am Mike Morgan, our producer, who you don't see but does a magnificent job. Mad Dog Phil Mullinax, keeping us technically sound. Apologies right off the bat. I don't like to start on a dour note, but I can't walk many places during our gap between shows. Hey, man, did I miss the show last week? I didn't get the alert or the update on the app. Sometimes personal things certainly get in the way, and logistics and everything else. JC's been going through a heck of a time, as well documented, and I won't make you go through that, JC. But needless to say, sometimes life throws you some hard knocks, and it's caused us a little bit of a delay. But we're glad to be back. We're glad to have you back, sir, in fine spirits. The show that is on campus 52 weeks out of the year, presented in part by MG&A Wealth.
Absolutely, man, and glad to be here talking a little college football. I think sometimes when life happens, like you said, you just want to get back to work, and we'd kind of been on a roll with Chief Sports and all that lately. And I do a lot for it, obviously, and not just talking with all of y'all, but behind the scenes. And so I was glad to have some backup while I was out, but certainly ready to get to chatting about college football again. February is almost over and we'll roll into spring practice. And there's another portal period and the summer will be here. It's definitely list season out there with an endless amount of lists here, there, and yonder from our friends in the media. And also looking forward to talking to Tony Barnhart yesterday. I've got so much respect for that guy.
Yeah.
I've read his columns for years. He's always been, I've met him a couple of times, always been very gracious and kind and just an inspiration, I think, to when I was a young reporter in Gainesville, Georgia, in the middle of dog country. I always read his stuff and always admired what he had to say. So I'm looking forward to catching up with him today. Also the JC5 and all of our other fun segments we have here on JC and Morgan.
Yeah, and we'll rifle right into that JC5 in a moment. But just to echo your thoughts, Tony Barnhart, who will join us at the bottom of the hour to use some radio talk at 9:30, right there with you. And I've been in Atlanta now 15 years. One of my thrills, believe it or not, was not in the play-by-play space, but on hosting sports talk shows. Back then, there was a station here that was the number one sports talk station for years and years, called 790 The Zone. And there was a midday show called Barnhart and Durham. Tony Barnhart and Wes Durham did it. And it was the one show in Atlanta that really focused on college football. Because for many years, this market was underserved. Atlanta, well, certainly, the beautiful thing about Atlanta, if you're a sports fan, it's such a treat to have all the pro teams, the Braves, the Falcons, the Hawks. And then, as we say many times, this is the mecca of college football. There's SEC fans of every school everywhere. You can't go a mile without seeing a Tennessee license plate or a South Carolina license plate, or somebody wearing a Florida T-shirt or a Texas whatever hat. And then, oh, by the way, yes, it's certainly Georgia Bulldog country. So we're fortunate, but the market was a little underserved, and that show gave us just Barnhart was certainly at the top of his game, doing everything he did for ESPN, and I got to be kind of the third wheel of that show, and I would co-host a couple days a week, and just had so much fun. And like you, JC, grew up watching Tony. So Tony is not retired; he still does stuff, but we've had him on once or twice before. Look forward to having him on today. You see the background on my screen for those watching on YouTube, Facebook, and X. That is Hard Rock Stadium. Mike, why you got a Dolphins picture behind your head over there? This ain't an NFL show. You're right. That is where the national championship game will be held in about 350 days. That is the host of the 2026 national championship game. So get ready for it, folks. Hard Rock Stadium, which seats about 65,000. I was there a couple of years ago to call a Dolphins game. It had been the first time in several years that I'd been to that stadium since they added those awnings to help protect people from the South Florida sun in the fall. It can be pretty brutal. So it's a cool stadium. It'll be a good sight. And who doesn't love warm weather in late January for those coming from whatever parts of the country that are not 78 degrees and sunny. I know it's not in the JC5, but eventually, JC, I want to run two things by you, which is this is from CFB Alerts, and I know these numbers aren't 100% accurate, and you know probably better than most just how accurate or not accurate they are, but they're estimates. I don't think they're that far off in terms of top 25 NIL college football earners. Everybody from Arch Manning, $6.5 million a year. Auburn has 3 players on this list. And of course, a lot of people made jokes. Well, they've spent more millions than they did get wins on the football field last year. And then it's just a parade of all the quarterbacks that they are, with the exception of Jeremiah Smith, they are the top earners throughout this list. So I thought that was interesting, as well as there's an interesting piece, Connor O'Gara, who we've also had here on JC and Morgan, talking about the percentage of returning talent. And that used to be something you would look at and go, well, shoot, they return the most players and snaps of anybody in the SEC. I guess they're the favorite. No, with the portal now, that list is upside down. More on that in the moment. But first, let's get into it. You know it. You love it. The morale of a great nation depends heavily on it. It is the JC5.
It's time for the top topics in the sport. We bring the JC5. Number 1.
Okay, dokie, Mike. Certainly good to get back into the JC5. We've talked about this a little bit on other shows, but I know, and I think we're kind of maybe on different sides of this debate over these play-in games they keep talking about. Of course, Jim Phillips from the ACC mentioned it, and I kind of laughed at it because 2 versus 3, and then 1 gets an auto pass into the playoff, assuming they go to automatic bids per conference. But from a TV, put on your television executive hat. Okay. Put on your I've got to go write a script for Real Housewives of New Jersey hat. Put on your numbers hat. Would a play-in weekend, specifically with the ACC, and maybe not even the Big Ten too, since it's a bi-coastal conference, and there are some bigger West Coast brands as part of that league now, and it impacts so many media markets. Would a play-in weekend not actually serve as more valuable because you have 4 games with 4 big-time, or 2 games with 4 big-time fan bases, and there is definitely something at stake besides a trophy for a championship? How valuable? Inventory, everything else, because we're in this kind of playoff crazy world now in college football. How valuable from a TV standpoint would those things be?
Now, I noticed in your lead up, you did not mention the SEC. Is there a reason you?
Oh yeah, the SEC would definitely be. In other words, and Atlanta. You spoke about Atlanta earlier. I mean, it's a perfect place to host it because they already with the kickoff games. Most years, not every year, most years they have 2 games back to back. This year, Syracuse plays Tennessee, South Carolina plays Virginia Tech on back to back days. So Atlanta could easily host something like this, as you know.
Yeah, sure, absolutely, and would love to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned some of the keys. Would TV love this? Absolutely. It's an extra game, right? Would the city love it? Yeah. Look, the reason why I asked if you intentionally left the SEC out is because I think the SEC is in a different spot. The other conferences desperately need something. You turn on the TV and you watch the ACC championship game, and it is full of empty seats, almost to an embarrassing level. The Big Ten championship game hasn't had a whole lot of buzz. It's had a lot of blowouts as well. The Big 12, the new revised Big 12, might actually have the most competitive conference championship games moving forward because there's really not a dominant great team in that league anymore, with all due respect. The SEC, I keep going back to this, and it's not just a sentimental thing for me. I know how they look at it. They don't want to do anything gimmicky. They want the top 2 teams in that game, as it has been since 1992, and it sells out before we even know the matchup. The tickets are already gobbled up. It's the highest rated conference championship game. It's not even close. And so I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot of pushback. It's easy for any of us to just sit there and kind of toy around with it. Let's do a little 14 playoff and let's do 1 and 4 and 2 and 3. And then my other question would be, the SEC already is going back to the Ross Dellinger piece, and we could do a whole show on this, but I said this the moment that there was the threat of not getting that 4th team in. I told you folks, people that I talked to said if that happens and they didn't get that 4th team in, you can expect 4 automatic bids to be right on top of the docket, and there will be a trip to the conference, a trip to the whatever boardroom, wherever. In this case, it happened to be in New Orleans. That they were going to make sure that this would never happen again, that they weren't going to lose a team to SMU based on 13 people that sat there in a climate-controlled room and watched a few videos and said, well, based on my incredible research, I think SMU is better than Alabama, whoever else. It's never going to happen again. It's not going to happen. So it's going to be come 2026. You watch. It will be 4 autos for the SEC, 4 autos for the Big Ten. So if it's 4 autos, JC, what is the benefit of the SEC having 1, 4, 2, 3, and a 14 playoff?
I don't think you'd do that. I think you would eliminate the championship game. In other words, 1 and 2, by virtue of them finishing the top 2 of the standings, would just get auto bids. It'd be like what the ACC floated out there. What Jim Phillips said was, number 1, if you win at the regular season, you just go, and then they'll play it off with 2 versus 3. What I think this is, Mike, and this is my take, we'll move on to the next topic unless you have a follow-up here, is this is a way to solve what's called schedule imbalance. These leagues have gotten so big, and if you're going to do, which I didn't, I understand the concept, and we seem to be making a lot of decisions based on championship weekend, which is fine. I get it. I love championship weekend, right? But we seem to make a lot of decisions based on how to save it, how to do this, how to do that. But they wanted to get 1 versus 2 to avoid, a weaker division winner not having a chance. The Big Ten, especially with like the Northwestern sneaking in there a bunch, and Purdue one year. God, that was only a couple of years ago. Purdue won the Big Ten West. They did it for that reason. But now, even if you go to 9 conference games, you've got some teams that play, and you can't even, with the portal and everything, you can't predict that. You have some team like look at the difference between the Slate Oklahoma got and the Slate Texas got.
Oh yeah, we talked about it all year.
And so what I think this is a way to say, all right, you're good enough to finish 6th, you're gonna get a shot at 3. Well, because this year, what would it have been had they done that? Georgia and Texas would have moved to the playoff, move on to the playoff. And then Tennessee would have played South Carolina, 3 versus 6. And then 4 versus 5 would have been Alabama, Ole Miss, and they'd have played it off and played it in. I think that's kind of where they're going with this. It's interesting because right now the auto bids clearly, Ross Dellinger did have something on X today that said that's the only thing format-wise that was really discussed is the auto bids. I think the question conference by conference becomes, well, if we're gonna handle this, how do we determine it? And also save that weekend because it's a big money maker, like you pointed out, for a long time.
Yeah,
it's a big time weekend.
Just so I'm clear, we got to go to 2 in that setup, JC, because we got to give out a trophy, right? We got to declare an actual SEC champion.
The regular season winner would just get it, or you could declare co-champions if they were tied.
I was going to say if they're tied. So Georgia had the head-to-head, right, with Texas.
Yes, but Georgia had 2 conference losses, and Texas was 7-1.
So we would have. That's right. We would have declared
the Longhorns would have won the SEC. They would have gotten the trophy,
even though Georgia beat Texas, and then we know Georgia then would beat Texas.
Beat Texas again? Yeah. I mean, I didn't say it. I don't know that it's a fair. I mean, I know in college basketball, though, you get a trophy for winning the SEC tournament, but the official champion is the regular season champion.
Correct.
I think the only league that still does the tournament as the official champion would be the ACC. I don't know if that's changed or not, but
all right. Well, you see where I had some issues with it. That's all.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, none of this is going to be perfect, my friend.
Yes,
none of this
very
is
true.
Be perfect.
Very true.
All right, number 2.
Number 2.
All right, so the combine gets kicking tomorrow. Officially, there's already people in Indianapolis there. It's going to be a heck of a combine. I think there's a lot of attention on it this year. Let's talk quarterbacks. Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders? Give me your pick, because that's right up your alley.
Yep. I love this stuff, and I love dissecting the first round. I love dissecting quarterbacks. And like every other person that does this, I've been right. I've been wrong. I think I've been right more than I've been wrong. I think this is a really tough call. Let me just say this. Cam, Shedeur, and the third guy in this equation could be Jackson Dart. If you really need a quarterback and you're in the mid to bottom of the first round, you might reach up and take him even though he doesn't have a first-round grade. None of these guys would have been selected ahead of the top 5 quarterbacks from last year. Talking Jaden Daniels, talking Drake May, talking Caleb Williams, even Bo Nix. None of these guys would have been drafted ahead of that group. This is not a great year for quarterbacks. So everybody knows about Shedeur, and everybody knows about Cam Ward. Miami was well on their way to a playoff before they spit the bit and gagged it away against Syracuse. I think Cam Ward is a better pure passer. I think there are red flags on both of them. I don't think there's a Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, Drake. I don't think that exists in this draft. But if I were to take one over the other, which is what the question is, and I do not duck and dodge JC5 questions. I have a staunch reputation of handling the tough questions that come my way on the JC5. I'll go Cam Ward.
As a player, I think Shurburtt has a shot. Working with Pat Shurmur the last couple of years, which I thought Dion was crazy getting rid of Sean Lewis, who was a great coordinator at the college level, but learning from a guy that's coached big time quarterbacks in the NFL, I think, and then who his dad is, and I was saying it should be interesting. But my prediction would be with you. I think Cam Ward will go above him and probably will be the better player. Let's get to number 3.
Number 3.
All right, number 3. Staying on the draft. Jeremiah Smith, some say he'd be a top 15 pick if he came out this year. Mike, higher or lower if he was part of this class?
Higher. I'd say top 10. You know, the NFL is the one league that doesn't draft usually on what we call upside. So, for example, the NBA will take a 19-year-old kid who's far from a finished product, and they'll give him a lot of money, and they'll say, well, give him 3 years, and he'll turn into an all-star. Major League Baseball does this. They'll take a kid out of high school, for crying out loud, but he throws 98, and even though he's not ready, he'll toil away in the minor leagues before we bring him up, and he'll play like a first-round pick then. The NFL is like, no, we draft grown men. We don't draft kids. We don't draft on upside. This is already a grown man. People went goo gaga over Marvin Harrison. I told you he wouldn't have even been my top wide receiver last year. I thought it'd be Rome Odunze. And Harrison, quite frankly, was a disappointment. People talked about him like he was this freak of nature. He was nothing special last year. Those of us who had him on our fantasy team realized that the hard way. I think this kid is different. I think Jeremiah Smith is a once-in-a-generation talent at the wide receiver position. He has everything: size, speed, route running, hands. So I think NFL teams would say, there's a guy that we can plug in right now, and he would be just an outstanding 1,000-plus yard receiver standout. So I would say top 10.
I agree. All right, on to number 4.
Number 4.
Number 4. All right, Notre Dame plays for a national championship last year. Second time they've done it since they won it all in '88. Recruiting is going well. Their athleticism has improved. They seem to have a knack for getting quarterbacks. I like their backup they had last year as a replacement for Riley Leonard. Tell me, is Notre Dame here to stay under Marcus Freeman? Can they keep it going where they are? You compete for national titles. Eventually, you're going to win one, right? You're going to kick in the door eventually. Tell me about your thoughts on the future of Notre Dame.
I think, with all due respect to Coach Freeman, Notre Dame is going to be what they were under Brian Kelly. And people like to crap on Brian Kelly right now. That's become a real popular thing to do. LSU fans might crap on him to the point where they fire him if he doesn't win a lot of games next year in Baton Rouge. Brian Kelly made it to a BCS championship game, 1 versus 2, and he made it to a college football playoff. And in each instance, Notre Dame got exposed for not being at the same level as the elite teams in college football. That's what happened in this national championship game. You watch Notre Dame against Ohio State. They didn't lose based on coaching. They lost based on Jimmy's and Joe's were just much better for Ohio State. And I think that's what Notre Dame's going to continue to do. They're going to recruit at a high enough level to be good, but not great, because they don't have the allure of an Ohio State or some of the SEC teams we're used to playing in this thing. So I think they're going to win a lot of games. They get to manipulate their own schedule, do everything by their own rules. So they will coast their way into the playoff every year. And then eventually they'll play teams that are just flat out better.
All right, wrapping it up at number 5. I thought Michigan as up and down as they were this year, and you kind of wondered at times, like Sherrod Moore, was this just like an interim replacement? You had the NCAA investigations. They didn't have a quarterback, but by God, they were sitting there at 6-5, and they beat Ohio State, and then they beat Alabama. If you're a Michigan fan and it's a follow-up to a national title year and you lost Harbaugh and you replaced him with his line coach, you lost a ton of good players, including McCarthy and all those dudes from that championship team that they built over time, you were going to take a step back, right? I think that's as good of a step back here with the way it ended as anything. What's the outlook now for Michigan? They're 2 years off of winning a national title now. They've recruited pretty well. They hit the portal. They got a player like Justice Haynes coming in from Alabama at running back who's supposed to be good. He can be that 25 carry a game guy for them, along with their other people. Your thoughts about Michigan? Do you see this thing bouncing back quick, or do you think it may maybe take a little time as Moore continues to get his feet wet as the head coach?
Well, look, the Big Ten is in some ways the most predictable league in college football. Don't take that personally, Big Ten fans, but you're living in a binary universe where it's Ohio State, Michigan. It's going to be, I think, Ohio State, Michigan almost every year. And that's a compliment to both those programs. That means they're both going to be really good every year. They're both going to be playoff teams just about every year. And the question will become, will Ryan Day get over the mental whatever it is that he can't beat Ohio State? But no, I think Michigan's going to find. Are going to be fine? Are they going to be Jim Harbaugh national championship good? You lost one of the best coaches in the sport, and coaching at some point does matter. A lot of times it's talent versus talent. Give coach more credit. He beat Ohio State. He got that. I don't want to say monkey off the back because he wasn't part of any of those losses. He was part of the winning streak as an assistant. But I think if he would have lost that, a lot of Michigan fans are ready to say, well, this guy's a great interim and it's a nice story, but we need to get ourselves our next Jim Harbaugh. Well, he's earned the right to be the head coach, and he'll be the guy now. So I think they're going to win a lot of games. I don't think they're going to be national championship good right away. I just think that the Harbaugh factor, that's a pretty big lot. Now, do I think Ryan Day is a great coach? No, but they built a super team with super coordinators in Columbus. If Michigan can do that, then maybe they win another national title. But I'm not sure yet that they're at that level where they're going to win a title. I just know that it's going to be Michigan, Ohio State out of the Big Ten almost every year. When you get the 4 automatic bids, tell me a year where those two teams are not in it out of that conference. That's going to be an anomaly.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. That is the JC5 Tempo edition. When we come back, Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football, joins us. You are listening and perhaps watching JC and Morgan. Mike here for our friends at MG&A Wealth. It's never a bad time to have someone on your side for all your financial needs. You need a trustworthy partner who has a true understanding of your situation in order to help you with smart and practical solutions. Since 1984, MG&A Wealth has helped their clients manage not just their wealth, but their lives. Today, as a nationally recognized wealth management firm, their team of pros remains dedicated to serving your best interests with an emphasis on personal attention and customized solutions. MG&A Wealth has clients all across the country, and they all get results. Don't put it off any longer. Call our friends at MG&A Wealth at 954-289-9000. That's 954-289-9000. MGAwealth.com is the website. They do more than manage wealth. They help manage lives.
Blow on energy? Struggling with inflammation and poor digestion? Try Encapsulate 6 Mushroom Blend and get back in the game. Our blend is specially formulated to promote overall wellness and maximize health benefits using 6 powerful functional mushrooms. Our science-forward approach offers the most potent and bioavailable mushroom supplement on the market, backed by third-party testing to ensure safety and efficacy. Order online on Amazon or encapsulateusa.com today to start your journey to better living. Enter promo code JCM for $10 off.
Hey, folks, want to tell you about our friends at Titan Construction Group really quick. They're a mid-Atlantic-based general contractor, specializes in retail, restaurant, and office construction. TCG strives to separate itself from other general contractors by adding value every step of the process. From project budgeting to estimation, value engineering to construction, they focus on those relationships and not the transaction. Titan builds partnerships one project at a time. Among their clients are Starbucks, Crumble Cookie, Blake Pizza, Home Goods, 15 plus years experience, based in Midlothian, Virginia, and contracted in Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. So get on their website, TitanCGinc.com. That's TitanCGinc.com. Get in touch with Brad if you're in need of a general contractor that focuses on going above and beyond for their clients. That's Titan Construction Group, a proud sponsor of the JC and Morgan podcast.
This is JC and Morgan on the Chief Sports Network.
College football forever.
It is college football forever and college football year-round, 52 weeks out of the year on campus, presented in part by Nest and Wild Mattress. Go to nestandwild.com. Have the most comfortable mattress in the world delivered right to your door. Brandon Jameson out of Tupelo, Mississippi, family-run business. You call them up, you talk right to the owner. You're right to the CEO. Brandon Jameson does a terrific job. You will be awfully glad that you've got your best sleep in years on a Nest and Wild mattress. We're going to have some of our best college football conversation years, because when Tony Barnhart joins us, you know he is dropping knowledge. Tony, you and I don't live that far apart. We're both still in Atlanta, I believe. And so I feel like I could just open up the door and yell, "Hey, Tony, what's the word?" But instead we're using technology, and we're not going to yell out the door. We're just going to talk to you. How are you, sir?
Mike, it's good to hear from you. We're doing well, and as Coach Spurrier used to say, football season is over. Now we're in the talking season. And,
talking season,
and
yes.
We got a lot of talking to do.
Well,
and some of it's pretty significant. So,
well, that's what made me think of you. And we did a little preamble at the top. JC and I are both, huge fans of your work. JC, in his writing days, looked at you as kind of a pioneer in covering the sport. And I remember growing up and watching you on College Game Day, and just like, Tony's on. I got to put my ear to the ground here. Hear what he's got to say. And one of my great thrills in sports talk radio was sitting in with you guys from time to time on Barnhart and Durham on 790 here in Atlanta. And I remember like SEC media days when Nick Saban would come out, wouldn't speak to any other group. But thanks to your connection, he'd come on over. All right, I'll give you guys 10 minutes. Like, that was awesome. You've always done a great job and had a, dare I say, a long-term perspective on the sport. This is no knock on people that cover it, that are in their late 20s or early 30s, that have very strong takes and opinions, and that's great. But I always look to, you're kind of the North Star. You've been there, done that. You've seen the evolution of this sport. You know the possible pitfalls of radical change. When I hear about all these changes, I'm thinking, gosh, Tony's got to be shaking his head going, what has happened to our beloved sport of college football? So where do you stand on all this? You saw the Dellinger article and where we're headed. You just saw a 12-team playoff. Where does Tony Barnhart stand on all these massive changes?
Well, the irony of it all, Mike, is that with all the changes, and I can't tell you how many people I hear from in NIL, transfer portal, you killing the game. The fact of the matter is, college football, the game that we watch every Saturday, is better than it's ever been. Mm-hmm. It's a great, great game. And they're getting ready to make some very important decisions, because they were, this is just Barnhart's opinion, they were asleep at the wheel when it was time to do something about the fact that the athletes weren't compensated, and the coaches were, and the administrators were, and the schools were. But I think we're going to get there, but we're going through some growing pains right now, and we got to figure out the next format for the CFP. I really enjoyed the 12-team playoff. Were all the games great? No, but I really enjoyed it because there's a lot of things we can get into why. But I just thought it was neat that when you won the Orange Bowl, you didn't get a trophy with a bunch of oranges on it and you walk home and that was it. No,
right.
You got all of that, but you get to keep playing. and I thought that was kind of neat. So I in a 30,000 foot sense, I am for it. Give me more football, and I'm going to enjoy it. But we got to go through some growing pains to get there.
But I know you're also a traditionalist. I remember when even the BCS came, maybe there was some resistance there. And, you know, uh, people like yourself that covered the sport from, I don't know, I don't want to date you too much, the 70s and beyond.
Oh yeah, I started in 1976.
Okay. So for a lot of people, the AP and the coaches poll, that was enough. And then there was resistance to the BCS, and then there was resistance to a 4 team, and of course there's resistance to a 12 team. It sounds like you've embraced the 12 team now.
Yep.
And I'm there, I'm right there with you. I understand that there's a lot of people like, wait a minute now, this is getting out of hand. Do we diminish the importance of the regular season? I actually thought there were more relevant games in November than what we've seen.
That's right.
But I know you also have, like I have, a very soft spot in your heart for what goes on in Atlanta every year in December with the SEC championship game. And now there's talk about, well, we'll just declare a regular season champion. The top 2 seeds, they advance, and then we're going to do these play-in games, right? 3, 4, 5, 6. Can you see a world where Greg Sankey and the SEC offices say, yeah, that seems cool?
Nope. I think I am on board for just about all the change that's going on, but that's where I'm drawing the line.
Yeah,
is the SEC championship game. I've been to every one of them, and it's no, that's a bridge too far. And I don't. Now, what are we going to do about the conference championship games with all the fact that they're playing 16, 17 games? What are we going to do? I'm not sure. But the SEC championship game. And Barnhart, this is where Barnhart wears his Homer SEC hat, is more ingrained in the culture than any of the other championship games. I mean, they're neat, they're great, and all, but it's just different. And that's hit. So no, I am in. I read those proposals about how to get multiple teams. It made my head hurt. Okay, no, it just did. And so no, the top 2 teams play for the conference championship, and that's it.
I'm with you. I can't see a world where the people that run the SEC sign off on that. You are doing that in the face of what, 30 years, 02, 12, over 30 years of the SEC title game being done a certain way. And I don't even know if it would be necessary. You could argue that TV might like it because it's an extra game.
Oh, sure.
I get that. So from that standpoint, the cash register would add a little bit more, but at some point you have to make a decision that it's not based primarily on cash.
Right.
Let's go back to the Dellinger article and what we think is more realistic, which is, and I warned people, like if the SEC didn't get that 4th team in, that there was going to be hell to pay, and that Greg Sankey was not going to sit back idly and watch that again, where 13 people in a room decided SMU was better than a 2-loss SEC team based purely on 2 versus 1, right? So now the word is Sankey and Petiti are going to demand, starting in 2026, 4 auto bids. Do you think that will come to fruition, and what do you think the impact is?
Well, yes, it will come to fruition. But I've always found it funny that it's interesting for all of us in the intelligentsia to tell Greg Sankey what he should do with the fate of the SEC and the SEC's financial wherewithal. And so it's the only. Remember what he said a year ago? He said, like Sesame Street, which one of these things is not like the other?
Oh, yeah.
And that's what he was talking about, the SEC and the Big Ten. They operate at a different level, and they have an advantage, and you're not just going to say, well, you can just give that away. And so do I like it? I think I will when all is said and done. But it's I think I don't see another way to get to where we want to go, and for the SEC to feels like it's been treated fairly.
We're talking with Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football. What are your biggest concerns moving forward then, with all these changes that are yet to take place, that will take place? What is Tony Barnhart saying, oh, no, I don't know if that's going to be a good move?
I'm okay with going to 14. Actually, I'd probably go to 16 because it gets murky when you start talking about buys and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's two things that I want to see happen, and we've got to go through this process to get there. One is a 9-game conference schedule.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's essential. I could give you 10 reasons why it needs to happen, and I think it can happen, and also it pays the bills. And the other thing is the discussed idea of having a playoff, a series between the Big Ten and the SEC. I like that idea.
Mm-hmm.
I like more good games. And as much as I admire what the Chattanooga and Marshall and all that, we've got to give the fans. We're asking the fans to pay the freight, which gets bigger and bigger and bigger for fewer quality games. And so I think we have to go through what we're going through now in order to get to a nine-team conference schedule and to have that playoff between the SEC and the Big 12. And oh, by the way, you can sell that as a separate package, and everybody makes more money.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, JC.
Tony, in your opinion, all right, so the SEC is as flawed as I thought the playoff selection was this year. The SEC does have something that needs to solve. That's the imbalanced schedule. At 8 this year, look at the difference between like the teams Texas played and Georgia played. Those were the top two teams. But look at that. I mean, Kirby Smart mentioned it after they beat Texas there. And the schedule, frankly, the conference schedule is what did in Ole Miss and Alabama when all was said and done. And Tennessee had a lighter slate and got in. So do you think a 9-game conference slate, when you do add an extra game in, a lot of them are going to be challenging because they're going to keep these secondary rivalries like Georgia Auburn or Texas Arkansas. Right. Do you think that will kind of solve that in a way as far as because that's my theory is that's why they're talking about the play-in games, because you got such a big conference, and if you're going to do it 1 through 16, it's impossible with the portal and everything else to get a balanced schedule out there for everybody. But 9, maybe that's a solution. What do you say about that?
I just think you have to go to 9. I think Mike and I have talked about this before, is that the fact that we could live in a world where Georgia and Auburn don't play every year, which is what we're looking at. And the oldest continuous rivalry in the Deep South, but that game goes away on an annual basis if we don't go to 9 games. So that's why that's among other reasons, that's why I'm in favor of it. And I think to balance it out, the Big Ten's playing 9 games. I think it would just simply be beneficial. Now, as one athletic director told me, he says, here's the problem, Barnhart, is that we have a lot of people in our conference who can count to 6. And that is a problem because you're trying to get it. You're trying to get into a bowl game, and we understand that. And if you have 9 conference games, guess what? You get 9 more conference losses. You get 9 more conference wins, but you get more losses, and it makes it more difficult. And the coaches have been screaming bloody murder. But still, I still think on balance, a 9-game schedule in the SEC is the way to go.
I think you nailed it there, because I think as fans, and even those of us in the media, we at the heart of it are still fans of the sport. And you're talking to some fans of the SEC in particular. We want to see the 9th conference game. It's just better football. There's been too many coaches out there, I'm not going to name names or program names, that know how to manipulate those non-con contests. And particularly if you don't have like a really grueling non-con ACC opponent, for example, South Carolina, Clemson, Florida State, Georgia Tech to some extent. If you don't have that, then you can really coast with those 4 non-conference games if you want to, and some have chosen to do so. So you have to have an appetite where the record is not going to look as pretty. Right. And I just wonder how much pushback there will be, because at that point, if you had that situation where you had the 8 conference game, and let's say your in-state rivalry game is a non-con versus the ACC, for example. So now you're at 9, or not. Now you're at 10. I beg your pardon. 9-game conference slate. Then you play a Big Ten opponent. Now you're 11. So you get 1 cupcake and 1 only.
That's right.
So it's going to be a gauntlet. As a fan, you're going to look at that schedule and go, man, this is juicy. And then you're going to suffer some losses and you're going to go, well, that's a little disappointing. Are fans ready for that, I guess, ready for the results?
You're absolutely right. And the fans will have to adjust to it. But listen, when all this stuff was being discussed at the very beginning, guys, the coaches were feeding back to their athletic director, says, look, if you give me a system where I can get into the playoffs with 2 losses, okay, then I'm on board. But if you can't guarantee me a spot with 2 losses, then I got a real problem. Mm-hmm. So I think ultimately what's driving all this, and you're right, I think we see a day when there's only 1 cupcake, and the folks who are trying to get to 6, that's going to be a problem for them. But again, the game has to evolve. It has to evolve. It has to get better. And the fans are saying, listen, I don't know about you guys, but when we had the COVID year and everybody played 10 conference games, people loved it. They thought that was the greatest thing in the world. And you can make an argument. Well, Nick Saban's been making this argument for like 10 years, 15 years. He said it just only makes sense. And here's the other reason to go to 9 conference games that I just remembered. And Saban brought this up. He said, you're in a situation that if you have a 9-game conference schedule, that means when a guy comes to play for you, if he stays all 4 years, he will play every team in the conference home and away. That's not the case now. Mm-hmm. And the cycle and every 2 years you play everybody in the conference and it makes a mixed bag. I think that's extremely important. And I think at the end of the day, will the fans fuss and complain? Sure they will. Of course they will. But again, the people who run the game, who are the caretakers of the game, they've got to look out for the long-term health of the game.
Yeah, and I think most people that are running things look at it more in terms of how can we get the most teams from our conference in the playoff as opposed to worried about mediocre teams qualifying for a Tier 3 bowl game. So the 4 automatic bids, which you and I both believe is going to happen, that takes care of that. That takes care of your schedule's tougher, so you're going to have more losses. Well, they're going to recognize if you're in the top 4 of the SEC, you're one of the best teams in the country, period. And so you're going to the playoff. And then you still have at large, by the way, to also take care of another couple of teams. Where do you draw the line? This is the concern I hear from fans of schools in the Big 12 and the ACC, where we know 2 of the premier programs have been trying to leave the conference. Where do you draw the line of, okay, SEC, Big Ten superiority, that's not a bad thing, versus, well, if everybody else can't compete financially with the resources of TV money, et cetera, not being nearly on a level playing field. Well, now we've got NFC, AFC, and if you're not in there, you're on the outside looking in, and it's a problem that only is going to get worse over time. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's no question that somebody said, well, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And I said, when have we been at a time when the rich didn't get richer? Okay, that is just an absolute fact of the situation. And there are going to be schools that are going to have to make a decision with the $20 million that's going to the players and all the other things. Is do they want to play at this level? A, do you want to play at this level? B, can you afford to play at this level? Some schools will not be able to do that. Mm-hmm. But it's part of but I just think the whole thing is, does the SEC and the Big Ten have built-in advantages? The answer to that question would be absolutely yes. And the SEC and the Big Ten are saying, we want everybody to be involved, but we're not giving up these advantages that we have, and the fact that we bring more viewers to the table. We contribute more than, and that's why schools have gotten the revenue share is different. To recognize that, I can't remember who it was. He said someday Dennis Dodd wrote something to think about. He said, don't you think that someday Alabama's going to wake up and go, why is Vanderbilt making the same amount of money we are? Yeah. Okay, so I think the NCAA drug their feet on this, and that's where we are now. So we better be smart and recognize some of these things and deal with them now. And I think the four automatic qualifiers for 4 teams in the SEC and the Big. I think it addresses all of that.
Do you think we have another wave of migration, realignment in the near future?
Only if certain people decide they don't want to play at this level anymore. But I think I think I think the Big Ten's maxed out, and I have and the desire. The SEC is happy that hey, we got 16 teams in 11 contiguous states. That's a pretty cool. Can't say that. So I don't see another way. But Mike, JC, we've learned, if anything, don't ever say nothing that can't happen, because it can.
It always seems to happen when the flames simmer. So like a year or two ago, Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, Virginia to the SEC. I mean, all those things were just smoking hot, which told me it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But now no one's talking about it, right? I mean, it's kind of like we're focused. We're all focused on the playoff expansion and automatic bids. So that whole story has died on a vine,
right?
More or less. And that's typically when something major happens. Yep. So I'm not expecting it, but that's when typically those type of stories drop. When nobody saw Texas and Oklahoma coming. Remember at the SEC Media Days a few years ago, like what? I can't remember who broke the story. I don't know if it was Dellinger or who, but that was massive. And none of us. I didn't hear that was happening. I don't know if you did, but that came out of nowhere.
No. And what's going to be interesting is when all this other stuff gets cleared up. You know, the format, the playoff, NIL, transfer portal. When all these things, someday there'll be some sanity brought to it. When those things get fixed, now the powers that be in college football go, okay, now what?
Yeah.
What can we do? So that you're right, Mike. That's when you need to watch out. So
wrapping things up with Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football. Tony, I'd be remiss, and I don't think we did this last time because we're so much into the present and the future right now in college football. But you have an illustrious past. What are some of the favorite moments for you in this business? Some of the things you've covered that still are special to you today in 2025?
Well, it's funny you should mention that. I'm working on a project now. This is going to be my 50th year of covering football of some kind. And one of the things I'm starting to do now is sketch out my favorite memories, which wasn't necessarily a great game. And there's a lot of great games. I've been very fortunate to go to a lot of great games. But for example, a memory would be September 11th, 2001. I was in my car driving to Knoxville, Tennessee. I was working for College Game Day, and my job was to shoot audio and video to get. That was Florida Tennessee week, and Florida Tennessee was must see TV. We were taking a game show to that game, and I'm halfway up I-75 to Knoxville when I get the call that the plane had hit the first tower, the North Tower. And during the whole drive, I'm on the phone to Bristol saying, "Hey, what do we want to do? Do I go back to Atlanta? Do I go on to Knoxville alone?" And that kind of stuff. And decided that I would go to Knoxville because that's where the story was. And it was an incredible day. But the day got kept off. Tennessee had a great defensive end by the name of Will Overstreet.
Yeah,
great player. And Will showed up for our interview wearing his practice clothes and all that. And he was holding his cell phone in his hand. And I said, "Will, are you okay?" He said, "Well, my sister was assigned to the Pentagon today. She was a photographer. She was assigned to the Pentagon." So he had the phone in his hand. And I just said, "Will, if that phone rings, you don't have to ask, just go."
Yeah.
So it was about that whole day and what it was like. And it was surreal, and making phone calls to all my loved ones. My daughter was a freshman at the University of Georgia. I had to check on her. My mother, who's now 82, had to check. So I'm just saying those are the kind of things that you remember. And so that's one, the launching of the SEC network, August 14th, 2014. I'll never forget it. We had reporters on every campus. I was in Starkville and where it was 95 degrees, and I was wearing a coat and tie, and said, "Tony, we want you to talk to Dak Prescott." And so I said, a very, very young Dak Prescott was there.
Wow.
And that was quite a day. And oh, by the way, that was my wedding anniversary. I remember I got a phone call from my mother saying she is, I know she wants to watch the SEC network, and she's calling me to wish me a happy anniversary. Actually, she was calling because she was trying to get the channel of the SEC network on her television. And so 5 minutes before air, I had to call local cable company to get the channel of the SEC network for my mother.
Oh my
And so
goodness.
it's those kind of memories that stick with you over the years.
That's awesome. There's so many, too many to count. Before we let you go, just if people want to catch any more of Tony Barnhart, you mentioned a book on the way. Anything else? Any other venues that we should look for?
Well, we just finished a book about my senior year at Greene County High School in Greensboro, Georgia. I played on the first ever integrated football team and did a book. I tracked down all the guys on the team that are still alive and all that. And it's called The 19 of Greene. We only had 19 players on the team from Greene County. So that is out. I'm hoping this project will turn into a book, the one I just described. And, but we're moving our location from a web standpoint. We are now on the Football Writers Association of America. They came to us and invited us to set up shop there, and we're going to do that. And now I'll be resuming that a little bit later on this year. But we're doing well.
That's fantastic. Well, I mean this with all sincerity. One of my great pleasures was, again, doing some work with you on local radio in Atlanta. And if there's a Mount Rushmore of people covering the sport, you are certainly on it. And hope to keep seeing you turn out some books and stories and everything else. And we hope you'll join us again soon. Tony, thank you so much.
All right,
can I second that? I wanted to second that, Mike.
Give it an amen.
Young reporter, Gainesville Times in Gainesville, Georgia, about 22 years ago. I read everything you wrote. I listened to everything you said. I absolutely loved every minute of reading your columns and listening to you, Tony. And it's an honor to have you on, man.
Well, I appreciate that, guys. It's been I've had a nice run, and I still enjoy. I've told my wife when I don't enjoy it anymore, then I know it's time to walk away. And so I'm still enjoying what I'm doing. So
and I like to follow you when you go with your friends to the Georgia games too, because I'm gonna do that with South Carolina games when I retire. So that it's kind of motivated me to do that. You know,
it has been an incredible experience, and we get together once. We know we're going to get together down in Jacksonville, and it has been so much fun and a lot of memories, and that will certainly be one of the memories in the book. So
you think that game will ever move home and home?
No.
I don't.
You make more money playing in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
When you go home and home, you get paid well when you're at home, but you don't get paid well when you're on the road.
That's right.
And the money, and this was pointed out to the head football coach at the University of Georgia, that, oh, coach, here's how much money we make when you play in Athens. Here's how much money you make when we play in Jacksonville. And the money was double.
Yeah.
I'm not real smart, but I think that carried it. Plus, I think Coach Smart's done reasonably well in recruiting, as I understand it. So.
Yeah, I don't think it's hurt him here lately, as he's kind of built a superpower in Athens. Tony, you're the best. Really appreciate the time as always, and hope to talk to you again soon. Again, thank you so much.
All right, thank you, guys.
You got it. Mr. College Football, Tony Barnhart, joining us here on the show. We'll take a final timeout, read some comments, any questions, go through a couple different. Oh, we got a Fiverr dimer recommendation from Sam. I like it. JC and Morgan will wrap things up on the other side.
Low on energy? Struggling with inflammation and poor digestion? Try Encapsulate 6 Mushroom Blend and get back in the game. Our blend is specially formulated to promote overall wellness and maximize health benefits using 6 powerful functional mushrooms. Our science-forward approach offers the most potent and bioavailable mushroom supplement on the market, backed by third-party testing to ensure safety and efficacy. Order online on Amazon or encapsulateusa.com today to start your journey to better living. Enter promo code JCM for $10 off.
Mike here for our friends at MG&A Wealth. It's never a bad time to have someone on your side for all your financial needs. You need a trustworthy partner who has a true understanding of your situation in order to help you with smart and practical solutions. Since 1984, MG&A Wealth has helped their clients manage not just their wealth, but their lives. Today, as a nationally recognized wealth management firm, their team of pros remains dedicated to serving your best interests with an emphasis on personal attention and customized solutions. MG&A Wealth has clients all across the country, and they all get results. Don't put it off any longer. Call our friends at MG&A Wealth at 954-289-9000. That's 954-289-9000. MGAwealth.com is the website. They do more than manage wealth. They help manage lives.
We're passionate about making sure that the Nest and Wild mattress is the best it can be. Made well and made right. Right here in Tupelo, Mississippi. So how can we do all that? Work. Hard work. And that means something. The Nest and Wild mattress is a movement. It's a pride in where you come from and where you're going. So get comfortable. Because this movement is just beginning.
This is JC and Morgan on the Chief Sports Network.
College football. Forever.
Very dramatic final key on that guitar there as we welcome you back into the final segment presented by MG&A Wealth for all your financial needs. It's a phone call that could help your family's well-being for years to come. Call Sean today at 954-289-9000, 954-289-9000. Clients all over the 50 states of this great nation. You can also go to mgawealth.com. Again, not a jack-in-the-box brick and mortar that you see on every street corner with the same kind of chain name, almost like a fast food chain. They're one of one, MG&A Wealth, and their results are one of one, have been since 1984. Call Sean today, 954-289-9000. Our thanks again to Tony Barnhart joining us on the program. Again, this time of year, as we always say, there is no off-season, JC, but when we don't go through the arduous grind of a week to week going over everything that happened on the field, it allows us some more time to have some great guests. That includes our regulars like Luke and Bill and Brando, but also some other folks that we check in with periodically. And Tony is always a great listen, so really appreciate him stopping by again.
Yeah, love his takes on things. And like I said, just a guy I've always admired. Keeps it real, honest, sometimes in the media in general, sports, politics, whatever, honesty is a lost, a lost art in some ways. Everybody's got that word narrative shoved in their mouths. And that's not journalism in my opinion, but Tony's a good journalist and was always fair, agree, disagree with him. He always made his points in a fair manner and just a good dude, just somebody that I've always admired. So it was great to talk to him.
All substance, no flash. And this is no knock. Like, I love the hustle. There's a lot of people that have created a market for themselves nowadays. It used to be if you didn't catch on with an ESPN or a CBS or whatever, and you wanted to really be a recognizable face and voice in the industry, you were out of luck. Those are the gatekeepers. Well, there's a back door now, and we're glad that it's there. It provides everybody more options. But with that, sometimes it's a little more flash than substance. As I said before, no knock on the 32-year-old that's given his hot takes on what should be every rule and stature and structure of the sport. But I'd rather have somebody that's got a little more context. I want somebody who's got a little gray hair in the beard, so to speak. I need somebody who actually can measure it with the history of the sport, and not just put together a hot take that they know are going to get more hits on YouTube. And Tony Barnhart has never been Mr. Flashy. He's never been somebody who's kind of come out of a pod of, well, this is what good TV guy looks like and sounds like. It's the substance that matters, and so we need more of those now more than ever, I think, covering this sport with the expanded coverage that we have. I teased this at the top, so let me just go over it real quick. Number one, this is from Connor O'Gara, who wrote a piece on where SEC teams rank among the 136 FBS programs on returning production, right? Percentage of returning production. And from an SEC standpoint, the bottom three teams, you probably saw this too, JC. The bottom three in the SEC, Texas at 103, Georgia at 105, and Ole Miss at 113. The teams with the most returning production, this used to be the stat that when you got your Lindy's and Athlon, be like, oh man, the most returning starters, they're going to be really good. A&M 6, Vanderbilt 8, and Oklahoma 10. Where am I going with all this? The portal has changed the way we look at all of this. The portal, it's not so much returning production. It's what do you, first off, I would always say, I was making this point on another show, if you're starting quarterback as part of the returning production and he's good to really good, well, you can add like 20% to that number. Because that's the most, I'd rather have the returning production be my star quarterback than 4 mid-level wide receivers, right? That's going to move the needle a hell of a lot more. But the other thing is, if you looked at that list, what do those bottom three all have in common? Well, they're all really good and expected to be really good in 2025, in spite of the fact that they lost a lot of key players. Well, in the case of Georgia, they just keep reloading. In the case of Ole Miss, they're a portal program. Lane Kiffin doesn't shy away from that. They are a portal program. And Texas kind of enjoys the best of both worlds as well. So that's where the winds of change are headed, right, JC? Like it's not just about returning production, because the portal can help fill those holes really quick.
Absolutely. And you I went through and looked kind of a raw number on 24/7 Sports the other day when I was going through some commit list and stuff, and looked at the SEC and saw, the total number of like players signed, incoming players. That's high school, which was normally around 25 before. So you're bringing between 18 and 25 in most years. Those numbers, the lowest was Vandy at 25. And they had a smaller recruiting class, and they did get some nice pieces from the transfer portal, I thought. And they're going to be dangerous again next year, because Pavia, they gave him his 10th year of school. He's been there since that 76 season Tony Barnhart was talking about.
Yes.
But he's there. Eli Stowers is back. I think anytime with what they run, they're becoming like a Navy almost, or Georgia Tech under Paul Johnson. They're going to hang in the balance. But they were the lowest at 25. Mississippi State, 51 new players. 51. Wow. And it's like, so I mean, I don't know how, most people are picking Mississippi State toward the bottom again for the early things I've seen, but how do we really know with 51 new players? And some of those are going to be guys they got from like lower level schools that we've never heard of. So maybe we subconsciously discount them out of the portal and they end up being studs. Some of them are not going to be as good as maybe we think. I mean, it's a crapshoot. Now, you look back on last year, most people at the end, you had Texas and Georgia. That was a pretty common pick for the two teams to end up in Atlanta. It wasn't an outlier or anything. Georgia had to go through a bunch of tiebreakers to get there, and that's going to happen just about every year. But we had Texas, and we had Oregon and Penn State in the Big Ten. That not surprising, Iowa State and Arizona State in the nobody picked that one. I think we had Iowa State as a sleeper.
Yes,
but Arizona State, most people picked toward the bottom.
No.
So that was interesting. And then the ACC, I think it wouldn't have been crazy to pick Clemson. Most probably said Clemson, Miami, but
Mm-hmm.
Clemson, SMU. There you go. So, I mean, so I don't know. I think if you look at the incoming players, it's going to be more and more difficult every year with that much roster turnover. I mean, Vandy was at 25. Mike, I think Georgia was at like 32. That's still, I mean, you're 10 players away from that being half of your roster out inbound, So I think it's interesting, but most all of the predictions I've seen have Texas because of the Arch Manning factor. They all have Texas up there pretty good. I think Texas plays Ohio State week 1 in Columbus though. So what that game won't tell us everything about the Longhorn season, but it will tell us how well they've done as far as replacing talent. And same with the Buckeyes, who have to replace 2 coordinators.
Speaking of Arch Manning, let me just say this again in bold print and flashing lights. These are not official figures because the way it stands now with NIL money, they don't have to release this. This is not a matter of public record. It's not like coaches' salaries where everybody knows to the penny what these coaches get in salaries at your favorite university, unless you're private, unless you're Vandy or Stanford, then you kind of got to guess a little bit. But Arch Manning is at the top of the NIL world at $6.5 million. Carson Beck, talk about a guy who's like living off 2 years ago as much as anything. I mean, he's racking up Lambos and all kinds of money last year at Georgia. And Georgia, by the way, does not just, as you've pointed out a number of times, they don't overspend. Like they don't have anybody on this list in the top 25 NIL earners. They're not spending money like a drunken sailor. That's not the way they do things in Athens. But Carson Beck did pretty well at Georgia. He was a 7-figure guy. Now he's a 7-figure guy times 4 at the U, dog. $4.2 million. $4.2 million for Carson Beck, which would make him number 2 on that list. Jeremiah Smith, that we talked about in the JC5, third at $4 million. DJ Lagway, a true sophomore at Florida, $3.8 million. And I know you have some issues with this number. Norris Sellers listed at 5 at $3.7 million. That number is off. Nussmeyer at 3.6, Klubnik 3.3, Drew Aller at 3.2. Got to win some bigger games, Drew, if you're going to earn 3.2. Nico at 3.1. You get the idea. It's a who's who of quarterbacks with some other players mixed in, and Auburn leads the way with 3 guys in the top 25. Just any thoughts on that list?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've gone through this for a while, even before there was a transfer portal. The value of the transfer quarterback can be quite lucrative. That some of those dollar figures are chump change if they work out and if they win games. I mean, Joe Burrow was a transfer. You think about the parade of guys at Oklahoma Lincoln Riley had them in the playoff every year. The transfer quarterbacks can work out for you in a great way. I mean, we're talking about Auburn being very much so improved next year because of Jackson Arnold coming in.
Yeah. Ohio State just won a title with a transfer quarterback.
For him. I'm thinking about last year, Michael Penix was a transfer from Indiana for Washington. The year before, who played TCU, was their quarterback a transfer? I don't remember.
I don't think so.
Yeah, he may have been homegrown. The new term is homegrown. Like homegrown used to mean players from your state, right? Now it means guys you did not get out of the portal. LA. I mean, I mentioned LSU and Joe Burrow. There's just there's very few schools that have been able to have the luxury of and even Ohio State, like you said, they needed a trick because Kyle McCord walked out the door and went to Syracuse.
Well, I think they kind of pushed him out personally. I think they scapegoated him
a little bit, yeah. But certainly Will Howard was an outstanding player at Kansas State, and actually I thought he got a lot better in the playoff than he maybe was during the regular season. But yeah, and I see more and more schools too handing the reins to true freshmen, or young players, redshirt freshmen or whatever. You look at Dylan Raiola at Nebraska. That guy, they won a big battle with Georgia for him. His dad was on staff there. And they had to kind of set it up for him now to get Dana Holgorsen in there to call the plays. And they got some players like Dane Key from the portal. But, I think at some schools you're going to see that more, just because you're a little concerned you're going to lose them. Now, Ohio State's not going to care. Ohio State, they've watched great quarterbacks go out the door, and they've been just fine. Their philosophy is just stack them up and stack them high and let God sort them out, right? That's kind of what they do. But you're going to see you're going to see that. I think it's and you mentioned DJ Lagway and his value. I mean, those guys at the top of that list, maybe not Garrett Nussmeier, but just because I think being a coach's son and stuff, you're probably not going to play the whole call his agent and try to get him in the portal game. But every one of those other guys, definitely. I mean, I would be shocked if DJ Lagway wasn't getting calls mid-season.
Oh, yeah.
It looked like Napier wasn't going to make it, to the point where he may have even had like a list, not his list, but some potential suitors. That's not the type of thing you're going to hear about. Like, hey, guess what? If Napier had gotten fired, we were probably getting Lagway. You're not going to hear that come out right now, but at some point maybe you will. But, I know some boosters at other schools were talking about getting Lenore Sellers. I mean, Carson Beck did go in the portal and ended up at Miami. So I am against overpaying players, especially some of these guys that aren't that good. If I'm going to say that you're worth 7 figures as a college player, you better be really, really good. Quarterback, Mike, is the exception. And it's really the exception in the NFL too. They pay those guys well. Because it's so valuable, as you, my friend, have pointed out for the whole, I guess, going on 9 years we've done this podcast.
Right. Yeah, no question. And there's certainly some quarterbacks on this list that, I mean, I mentioned a couple of them, but you could keep going down the list and be like, really? He's a 7-figure guy? Look, if you are the starting quarterback of a Power 4 team and you're already documented good, you're a 7-figure guy. That's just the market value. I envision a time as the money's not going anywhere but north. You're going to see a league like the SEC, for example. If you're a starting quarterback there, probably 15 out of 16 are going to be 7-figure guys. I don't know what Diego Pavia is making at Vanderbilt. I wouldn't be surprised if he's right around $1 million. So it might be 16 out of 16. Big Ten could be in the same boat. Those two conferences are flush with cash. And if you want to be in the game, you got to have a good quarterback. So that's something that's going to be interesting throughout time.
That's why with if rev share holds, which the state of Oregon's already filing bills to take the NIL component out of it. So who the hell knows where we're going with that. But if it holds, it's going to be interesting because you said the numbers will go north. I think they will. I think what'll happen though, it'll be more gradual than maybe it's been. Just because that number, the ceiling, the cut, the 20.5 million will grow with increased television revenue and stuff. So the SEC schools just distributed like $52 million to out of their TV money. Now there's more revenue than that in the athletics department. It's, well north of 100 million in most places. So that number though, as the SEC is supposed to, the television contract is supposed to top out about 90 million a school. So that number will grow as we move forward. And you can bet your bottom dollar, Mike, that the quarterbacks are going to be getting paid. I mean, you just like you said, maybe 2 of them. You may pay the backup too if he's a hot shot.
Texas
young guy.
did. Texas had 2 7-figure guys with Ewers and Arch.
And look, a lot of people are going to look at the Arch Manning valuation on that list and go, well, he hadn't done anything. Well, with NIL in its truest sense, and I know it's pay for play, so everybody bear with me. Being Manning, being Arch, that's worth an extra $2 million, right? because if your valuation, a lot of times it's not necessarily the best players. It's your profile, because you're going to have to pay Arch Manning because of his last name more to do a car commercial than you are, the guy that played running back for him last year and made a lot of noise. That was really good doing it. So that's something to keep in mind too. That's why Shedeur Sanders, as good as he is, as good as I think he is, it had a higher valuation than anybody in the country last year because he's Deion's kid.
Sure, it helps. Name recognition, brand recognition. I do think a lot of people are under the assumption when this revenue sharing kicks in, as you mentioned, 21.5, that's going to grow incrementally year by year. It's 22, 22.5, 23. That does not mean we are at like a salary cap situation. NIL is still going to be there. That's going to be monitored better, but you're never going to convince me that the bag, so to speak, is not going to still be a part of recruiting in men's basketball and college football. So the programs that have the most access to cash with boosters and everything else, I still think they're going to have a distinct advantage somewhere out there, JC.
Well, yeah, and what happens is, you can't use booster money. Like right now, what collectives do is you have donors to collectives, and they'll write checks, and some of them are connected with 501c3s, and they can, in theory, write it off, right? So, there's been some talk about that's not really what from the IRS that no, you can't. But anyway, it's a little bit more loosey goosey. So now you can't put donor money in. So how do NIL collectives generate revenue? Well, memberships are not donors. That's not a donation because you get something in return, whether that's a signed item or a newsletter or content or whatever. And so you have the memberships, then you have business development partnerships that generate revenue. And what the collectives are going to turn around and do is, establish small in terms of time spent, but establish ways to have players do media or do promotions and pay them. And, even if you do fair market value with some guys, that number is going to be up there. I mean, it's not going to be, here's $500,000 for 2 tweets anymore, but you could have them, have them do 25 tweets and maybe you get there. I don't know. So you're absolutely right. The thing that revenue share will help do as far as balancing it is in football. I think you can only spend so much. And that's not per player necessarily. If you got a special player you got to hold on to is very important, like a quarterback. That's just overall. You can't have a bunch of 18-year-old millionaires walking around and expect to win in that sport because it's still developmental. And, Oregon was talking about unlimited NIL, and that's all well and good. But I don't think Dan Lanning's paying, half of his roster like he's paying, paid Dylan Gabriel last year, right? Mm-hmm. That's just football, right? I think it's going to also in other sports put the onus on the collectives because so much of the rev share money is going to football. Like men's basketball right now, so between $5 and $6 million in the SEC. When you start talking about revenue share, those numbers don't work because, 15 is the number I've heard for football. Some are like 15.9, some are 14.9. And then men's basketball is more like 3.5. So the collective dollars are going to have to flow into those sports, baseball included, for sports that care about it, women's basketball and all that stuff. So, but it is going to be important. The good thing about it from a collective standpoint now is in the past, it's hard. I don't care where you're at, how much they love football. It's still hard at times, especially when your team's not winning, to get $30 million in the coffers for one season. And we've seen it at other places where there's one school in the SEC in particular that started off like gangbusters, and they're located in a place that has a lot of good businesses and they have good boosters and they do spend money at the school, their flagship school, right? They hadn't been winning, and football NIL is a struggle right now, and their athletic director mentioned it. And so some schools have gone that way. Your consistent schools have been like Ole Miss because they know they're going to have to the portal. They have a great NIL situation at Ole Miss. Everybody knows it. Whereas some other schools, maybe not. It goes up and down. What this does is it gives Illinois, Brett Bielema mentioned this, I think, week of the Citrus Bowl. Illinois their NIL laws, they need to change it, but it's the state of Illinois. Trust me. But what this is going to do for them is actually increase their pool of money. It's going to go from about 6 or 7 to 15, 16, because they're in the Big Ten. And so they were like, man, we've been trying to out evaluate people and everything else. And now we have access financially to keep guys from leaving, which is most important. And then, get new talent. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think you're right. I mean, obviously, resource-rich schools have always kind of won in this sport. I think some folks are going to be surprised as to which schools actually do have the resources. You mentioned the Bagman era, or you mentioned the Bag. Mm-hmm. If you go back and read that article on the Bagman that was on SB Nation a couple of years ago, a lot of that's pretty close to true as far as the how that worked. It's never your guy that writes the check who's got his names on buildings. It's a guy that maybe owns a pretty big, maybe he owns a couple of McDonald's or something. If I wanted to go down that road, I'd mention Taco Bell's because Sean Toohey and The Blind Side, that's what he did. He owned Taco, but I'm not going to do that. I don't want to get sued by anybody that has anything to do with that. But that maybe they own a couple of McDonald's, maybe they own a mechanic shop that's really good. They have disposable income, but they're not the guys that sit in the box with the president on Saturdays. They fly under the radar. Those dollar amounts, Mike, will not even get you a starter in the SEC now.
Right.
You're talking $180,000 out the door for all 4 years or 3 years, however long he stayed, for a top of the line prospect.
Yeah.
Tops. Now 180 is an average SEC starter as far as what they're making in NIL. So, and I think when you get in the Bagman part of it, a lot of that was, let's just face it, cash. Well, it's harder to have 7 figures sitting around in cash in dare I say McDonald's bags
mm-hmm.
than it is to have, 10, 15, 20 grand every now, that you kind of dribble out. So there's some red flags that go up with that kind of money. So anyway, I just somebody in the chat box said that Shurburtt kind of money.
Shurburtt kind of money.
I wish, man. I wish I was a big daddy Warbucks, right?
Well, there's still time. There's still time. By the way, since you mentioned Chat Row, we love the folks that greet us with a good morning. Frederick, Queen of Cox, Craig, right back at you. What's good, Mike? This show, we love doing it, and we're glad to be back. Tony Barnhart was good, if not great, and you guys are fantastic. I know the overwhelming majority of our audience can't tune in live and listen to it at their own pace or schedule, and that's fine, but we love the interaction. Sam says, just finished Cobra Kai, would love to get Fiverr or Dimer thoughts on Karate Kid trilogy. All right, this is something near and dear to my heart. I take this very seriously. Karate Kid 1 is a Ben Franklin. It's beyond a Dimer. If it's on, I can't help but watch. Okay, I can't help but feel for Tony LaRusso. Did he have an ass kick or two coming? Probably. The shades, a little too much swagger for a guy who was, kind of like on somebody else's turf. Never, ever should have taken the hose, JC, and sprayed it on the head of the Cobra Kai, Johnny Lawrence. I mean, in a lot of ways, again, you're asking for an ass kicking doing that. And that's when they had a peace agreement. You don't do that. But that whole story, by the way, the director of that is the guy who made Rocky. Did you know that? That's the guy who directed Rocky is the guy that came up with Karate Kid. Dude. I found that out like a year ago. I was like, you serious? And when you watch the movie, there's a little bit of a Rocky type theme, underdog turned champion thing to it. So Karate Kid 1, Ben Franklin. Karate Kid 2, neither. I saw it once when I was a kid, and I was like, no, this is jumping the shark. I'm not buying the love story. I'm not buying now he's in Okinawa and he's fighting just random guys who are angry at him for some reason. And the acting drop off, and this is Ralph Macchio, the sad demise of his career, because he had My Cousin Vinny, but the Karate Kid trilogy, 2, and I'm going to get to 3 in a moment, reluctantly. So 2 is a step back. That is not even Fiverr level. If it's on, I have no interest. And very often, cable companies will say, "How do we film 9 hours of programming? Just run the Karate Kid trilogy." Yeah, but 2 and 3 sucked. I don't care. We need 9 hours. Okay, so 2 and 3 are on after 1. So you start off this great classic, but this ain't The Godfather, where 2 is outstanding. This isn't even Jaws, where Jaws 2 is certainly watchable. This is 2 is bad, and 3 is such an abomination. It pains me to even talk about it. But since you asked, Sam, Karate Kid 3 is one of the worst scripts to ever go through Hollywood. They're basing this kid is basing his whole life on a bonsai tree company. And he's getting a little too close to the old man, quite honestly. It's kind of like Joey Tata of 90210, old Nat in the Peach Pit. It's like, dude, you got more time in your social calendar than just spend it with a bunch of teenagers and getting into their personal lives. We're getting into an uncomfortable zone. That's kind of how I felt about 3. The acting by Ralph Macchio is so bad in Karate Kid 3 that I truly believe he never recovered. So I'm thankful to the series Cobra Kai, which I've not finished. I was too busy watching Landman, and now I'm on Tulsa King, thanks to JC, and I think that's really good. I'm glad that Ralph Macchio and I think it's William Zabka, who also played the bad guy in Back to School. He was the diver that used to bully Thornton Mellon's kids. Also underrated performance in Just One of the Guys. Zabka and Macchio, if you've seen it, then you know what I speak of. It's a very underrated Fiverr.
Yes, I remember Just One of the Guys.
so bad it's good. But yeah, I'm glad for Zabka. I'm glad for Macchio. They've had fun with this. It's well done. It's worth watching, and more importantly, they can now pay the rent, because I was worried, I was genuinely worried. What are they going to do? I'm amazed some of these people in Hollywood that haven't done anything good in 20 years are still living in California and paying those taxes and still driving around and is there residual coming out of some of these flicks? What they call back end money, because usually you don't get much back end money anymore. But anyway, that's a long way of saying 1, Ben Franklin, 2, neither, 3, an absolute abomination to American film history, and the ultimate end of Ralph Macchio as a potential leading man in Hollywood. JC, where do you weigh in on this very critical and insightful question?
I've only seen I saw one. I don't even think I've seen 3. I went to the movies to see 2. They got the Peter Cetera song in it. That's a good song. The Glory of Love. That's an anthem. That's the best. I kind of thought that was the best part about that movie. And I did think the scenery in Okinawa was pretty cool, but I mean, my wife.
They probably filmed it in Lubbock, Texas. I don't know if they had the budget to go to Okinawa.
Some spots in Northern California would have probably been fine, but
yeah.
My wife though loves Cobra Kai and just finished the whole thing. That was something when Sam put that on Chat Row, I was like, oh yeah, you're like-minded, but it's nostalgic. People like it. Maybe someday I'll watch it, but I've started this show on Hulu called Paradise that's pretty promising.
Who's in now?
Because I'm done. I finished Tulsa King in 2 weeks.
We're gonna binge that. I'm all in on that. And Landman season 2 can't start soon enough. And yes, Sam, you're the best around, and the original Karate Kid was supposed to be in Rocky, and it's a really catchy song. That was a workout song for years, truly. Back in as recently as the early 2000s, I'd go ahead and crank that sucker up. I think it was Sam Esposito or something. I don't know. Talk about a one-hit wonder. But anyway, we could do a whole show on the Karate Kid arc, if you will. And by the way, what's her name? The blonde. She was great in Leaving Las Vegas, Adventures in Babies. Elizabeth Shue. We love Elizabeth Shue on this show. Big fans of the shoe. That's all I'm going to say. JC, some final thoughts as we wrap things up on another winning installment of JC and Morgan. JC? Did we lose JC? He's not hearing me. All right, well, I guess I'll wrap things up. That means we're just about out of time. For our producer, Phil Molinax, and you got me now, JC, or no? You can't hear me. Okay. For Mad Dog, for JC, most of all, Tony Barnhart, and for all of you tuning in each and every week, we'll be back next week, I promise. Thanks again for tuning in on JC and Morgan. To the thousands of you throughout this great nation of ours, we say thank you, as always, for choosing us, and we will see you next week on JC and Morgan.